when you have a history of greatness, the real challenge starts after the finish line.
I can taste triumph with the heart of a lion.
When victory alone isn't enough, you chase something greater, no matter how difficult the path, on the dirt, in the sand, and beyond. The new 2024 Ridgeline, Passport, and Pilot, part of our most rugged trail sport lineup yet. From Honda.
Good evening and welcome to our show, Going Public. I'm Renee Fonseca, and joining us tonight is Mark Torbert, the Child Welfare and Attendance Director for the Terrebonne Parish School District. I want to thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to go over a very important topic in our district, bullying. Mm-hmm. What is school bullying?
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Renee. And I appreciate the time given because this is a topic that affects whether you're in kindergarten all the way through a senior in high school, maybe even beyond. So several years ago, the state legislation passed, as legislators rather, passed the revised statute 416.414. That is our discipline statute. The 416 is discipline as it compares to schools or reflects schools. So with that being said, they define bullying and processes and procedures that schools are obligated to follow when they're investigating various complaints. So bullying, the biggest thing about bullying is looking for a pattern of behavior. It can be anywhere from being something verbal, it could be something physical, could be even something on social media or cyberbullying, that type of thing. And so it can take basically a lot of different forms. And one of the challenges for it is identifying the pattern of behavior. And that's what schools try to do as quick as they can.
Let's talk about trainings. What type of trainings does Terrebonne Parish provide their teachers and their staff?
Well, that too can be pretty wide list on that, but we do use an online program. It's a vector solutions program that does offer a variety of trainings, and part of the statute does specify that a new employee has to do a minimum of 4 hours training. A veteran employee only has to do 2. But I would tell you that depending on the circumstances of a, say, particular school, possibly department, that can obviously be increased, whether you're a veteran or if you're a brand new employee. So we try to look at data and try to develop plans and programs that will help staff identify things, or if there's a common problem on a campus, to where the training meets the need of the campus.
And so this is a mandatory training for every year?
Yes. Yes, like I said, the 4 hours is for your first year as a brand new employee, and then 2 hours thereafter.
Good. Let's talk about how can a parent or how can someone report, a student even, report school bullying? Sure.
Good question, because it's usually one of the bigger problems. We don't know about it until after a more significant issue occurs. They can do it in many ways. One of the most common ways is usually they call the school and they explain. Another obvious way is the student brings it to the attention of the staff member. And a staff member can be any adult, really. I try to encourage kids just to get to the nearest adult if they're having a big problem. And then that individual can get it then to the right people to hopefully look into it. Then another most common deal with the internet and that type of thing. On our district webpage, and I might add that it's also located on every school page as they navigate to their different schools. But at the bottom, as you can see on your screen, at the bottom right of the page, and when you're facing it, it says report bullying. And when it's very simple, parents can link on that, the student can link on that, or click on it rather, and it brings up that document that is being shown on the screen now. And they can fill it out. As much information as possible will help the school identify the issue in the best, again, as much detail as they can possibly give us. It'll help us hopefully speed up the investigation, but also get to the bottom of it quicker.
And once this document is completed, is it sent to the school or is it sent to you guys at central office?
Yeah, good question. So the document is sent to, I've heard different things, so I'm not sure if settings are different for other schools, but I know primarily it is noted, myself and Mr. Butler, who also works in our department, we get a notification, believe it or not, on our phones, and then we also get an email notification. And so once we get that, we review the document or the complaint, and then we give it or disperse it to the proper schools. Usually we send it to the head principal, and then the principal determines who's going to investigate it on that campus. It also includes emails for our local law enforcement, whether it goes to HPD as well as the sheriff's office. But generally speaking, they'll not get involved with it initially because they let us look into it first, because sometimes it's only a school issue. Most cases, it's really just a school issue that may become a legal issue, and if it does, then we consult with our partners in those areas.
So it does sound like immediate action. If you get a notification on your phone, I mean, you're getting this instantly.
Oh, yes. It's not uncommon for us to get the notification. It's after hours or it's on a holiday or something on that line. And then we follow up with it as required by the statute. You need to follow up with it or start the following up process immediately on the next business day that you can get to it. And then you have certain timelines that you have to get the investigation completed in order to get letters and things like that to notify the parties that either you found bullying or you didn't, and that kind of thing.
Now, once a school receives the report, if the principal or whoever they designate receives this report, what is the process that is taken?
Well, generally speaking, you're going to, first, if you can identify the players at hand, if you can identify what we refer to as the victim, if you want to call it that, then you want to interview as many kids as you can. So you're definitely going to interview the person. I know in my practice over the years, I would interview the victim and talk to the person. Sometimes you'd have the parents there too, which was no problem. But then you'd also interview those who are being accused of being the problem, and there too, sometimes you have the parents there as well, and then you go from there based on the information. Usually, if I had a denial from a student, that generally would prolong the investigation. But if the kids, if they both, a lot of times they would admit, yeah, I did the X, Y, and Z, then you may not necessarily have to involve other kids because there was no dispute as to what was happening. And then from there, it either goes into a discipline issue or in what type of consequence you can render. And then obviously, no matter what direction the investigation takes, you contact the parents and involving them, whether it be by letter or by phone or in-person conferences.
Well, we do have to take a short break. We will continue this discussion once we come back from our break. Please continue to join us after the break. Thank you.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough.
Good evening and welcome back to Going Public. If you are just joining us, I am Renee Fonseca, and joining us tonight is Mark Torbert, the Child Welfare and Attendance Director for the Terrebonne Parish School District. I want to thank you once again for coming on today, and you have a busy schedule going on.
Yep, thank you for having me.
I know before the break we were talking about bullying. Of course, this is a very important topic in our district and country, throughout our country. We were talking about the process. Can we get a little more detail about what are some of the consequences that these perpetrators receive?
Yeah, good question, because that's usually a piece that confuses parents and even kids sometimes. So the statute does specify that appropriate action taken if you find the evidence of bullying. So if evidence of bullying is found, obviously it depends on the severity of what we're talking about. And it can range the gamut. It can range from a conversation of us having a discussion to start things off. That's probably the least invasive, if you want to call it that, consequence I can give a kid, is that we'll have a conversation to discuss it. And obviously to the age of the kids involved, we'll maybe determine some of that too. Generally speaking, you always could probably include the counselors in there and to monitor it in those kind of deals. At the very least, though, in addition to the conversations, the statute requires you to send home a letter, like I said earlier, to both sides of it, that either you found evidence of it or you didn't. And if you did, you wouldn't necessarily identify what consequence was given, just out of confidentiality and things like that. But again, the severity of the issue can determine, it could result in a student being suspended. It could result in a student being removed from the campus. And I go back to what I mentioned earlier, that law enforcement could possibly get involved. If it's something dealing with cyberbullying, generally speaking, the cyberbullying piece is not something that really involves us a lot. We get involved in it because it does involve schools, but that would probably be more on the legal side. It doesn't mean that we don't take a disciplinary action if a kid presents something from social media, or because a lot of times those cases are something outside of school, so it's not something that originated within the school grounds. And so those are the kind of things we have to balance when we're looking at these incidents. It doesn't mean that issues aren't or consequences aren't issued, but it just means that we might have to take a different step in order to try to remedy the problem.
And how are we being proactive in our district? What do we do to prevent bullying?
Well, I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier, that when we do the trainings with teachers, first and foremost, can you identify it? And if teachers aren't trained or staff aren't trained to identify problems or patterns, then we definitely have to work on that. And it depends on the need of the campus. Some campuses need more than others. And so we work with that. Our positive behavior intervention support programs, schools have committees that meet regularly, and they do different activities in order to try to promote just getting along, in a sense, and that kids just understand that you're going to have differences and things, and it doesn't need to lead to more aggressive type steps, but that hopefully recognizing behaviors that are acceptable behaviors, it also translates to what's accepted maybe when the kids get older and they're in the workforce and so on. So I think those are probably the biggest ones, making sure training is adequate and it's up to date, but also making sure that our PBIS programs are well suited on the campuses, and that part of the training also includes monitoring data. Part of the training also talks about communication. A lot of times are we communicating enough with the parents, or the parents communicating enough with us to make sure that it's staying up to date.
Now, I know you mentioned cyberbullying, and let's talk about social media. I know it is very prevalent in our society today.
Yes.
How does social media affect the level of bullying that is occurring in our schools at this time?
Yeah, it's a good question, because social media has definitely added an element. Obviously, there's a ton of positive things with social media, but when you come to, I believe it makes people braver when they're behind a keyboard, and they're able to type things or send things. And we're talking about teenagers or young kids that they wouldn't maybe say it to someone in person, or like maybe when we were kids, it was on the phone and you hung up and you didn't think about it, read about it, or anything. But now with social media, it never really goes away. And so that's one of the problems that I find, that it lingers. And as soon as you think you have something resolved, it could be 3:00 in the afternoon, you think you had it resolved, everything was worked out, until the student goes home and somebody comes across the posting and they repost it, or they had a picture they took maybe when they were 10 and now they're 15, and it's something that people are making fun of or teasing because it just never went away. And so social media definitely keeps things alive more than, say, maybe when we were kids. You simply hung the phone up and you just probably forgot about it. But now it's a constant reminder. But on the same side of it, when we're doing our investigations and things, it does assist us when you do have kids who deny that they're doing X, Y, and Z, that it does give us a record of things in order to be able to help us, again, speed up the investigation, speed up the reaction that we have to it, and hopefully speed up the fact that, hey, we need to realize this is not acceptable, and kids need to cut it out.
And what are some strategies parents can take to prevent their child from bullying others, or,
Well, this might sound old-fashioned. It's a good question, but frankly, having dinner together, sitting around the dinner table and having conversations with your kids, staying involved with them. I mean, obviously, I'm not a psychologist or family therapist or something on that line. I just know that those common things that we did probably, again, when we were kids, you stay connected with your parents, stay connected with each other, and then the kids aren't glued to their phones or glued to other means of communication, and parents are aware that maybe their children are having some problems, that they can get it to light to where we can get them some help. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is, again, keeping that communication not only with us as a school, but communication amongst the family. It definitely helps out.
Well, good. I want to thank you for joining us today to go over bullying.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to thank you, our viewers, for watching. Don't forget to join us every week on Going Public. Good night.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.